Deep within a forgotten medical archive, amongst yellowed papers and dust-covered magnetic tapes, one of the most extraordinary testimonies in the history of modern medicine was discovered. For decades, this material remained hidden, kept under absolute secrecy by authorities who feared its implications. What came to light were not merely the words of a renowned surgeon, but confessions that challenge everything official science accepts about life, death, and what lies beyond the veil of physical existence. Dr. Julian Reed, an internationally recognized cardiovascular surgeon, had built his reputation on the solid foundations of traditional medicine. For over 3 decades, his hands saved thousands of lives. His scalpel danced between arteries and valves with the precision of a conductor leading a symphony. In the halls of the most prestigious hospitals, his name was whispered with reverence, and his surgical techniques were studied by a new generation of doctors seeking to achieve his excellence. However, behind this facade of scientific competence, a silent transformation was occurring, a change he would never dare share publicly until the weight of years and the proximity of his own mortality made it impossible to remain silent. The recording was made in 1998, in the last months of his active medical practice, when the cancer growing in his lungs had already begun to whisper reminders about the fragility of human existence. Sitting in his private library, surrounded by decades of accumulated medical knowledge, Dr. Reed spoke into an old tape recorder, his words emerging as confessions from a soul that could no longer bear the weight of extraordinary revelations alone. His voice, though still firm, carried the texture of someone who had seen beyond the limits of conventional human understanding. It all began in 1975, during an emergency heart surgery that would become a watershed moment in his perception of reality. The patient, a 62-year-old man named Arthur Miller, had arrived at the hospital in critical condition after a massive heart attack. The first few hours were a desperate battle against time, with Dr. Reed and his team employing every available resource to stabilize a heart that stubbornly refused to beat. During the surgery, the inevitable happened. The patient went into complete cardiac arrest, his electrocardiogram transforming into a flatline that echoed through the operating room like an electronic lament. For 17 minutes, Arthur Miller was clinically dead. 17 minutes, during which Dr. Reed and his team worked tirelessly to bring him back, applying electric shocks, cardiac massage, and every resuscitation protocol known to medicine. When they finally managed to restore his heartbeat and Arthur returned to life, something in his eyes had changed profoundly. It wasn't just the look of someone who had escaped death, but of someone who had visited unknown territories and returned with memories that defied all medical logic. In the days following the surgery, while Arthur recovered in the intensive care unit, he began to report experiences that Dr. Reed initially dismissed as post-operative hallucinations, side effects of anesthesia, or delirium caused by oxygen deprivation. The patient described in striking detail floating above his own body during the surgery, observing every movement of the medical team, every instrument used, every word spoken. Even more disturbing, he could describe conversations that had taken place in adjacent rooms, details about other patients in the hospital, and even events that were happening at his home, miles away. Initially, Dr. Reed tried to rationalize these narratives through the lens of conventional science. Perhaps the patient had briefly regained consciousness during the surgery. Perhaps fragments of conversations had been processed by his brain unconsciously. However, as he verified each detail reported by Arthur, the traditional scientific explanation began to crumble. The patient described with surgical precision events that had occurred when he was demonstrably without measurable brain activity, moments when monitors confirmed a total absence of brain waves. But Arthur Miller's revelations went beyond mere out-of-body observation. He spoke of a transcendental encounter with his wife, Mary, who had passed away 3 years earlier from a devastating cancer. According to his account, Mary appeared to him in an environment of indescribable light, a place where colors possessed hues that did not exist in the earthly visual spectrum, and where communication happened without words, through a form of emotional telepathy that transmitted not only thoughts but complete feelings and shared memories instantaneously. Arthur described this encounter with such pure and overwhelming emotion that tears involuntarily welled up in his eyes each time he tried to put the experience into words. "Mary," he said, not only looked younger and more radiant than she had ever been in life, but emanated a wisdom and peace that transcended any human understanding. She communicated to him that his mission on Earth was not yet complete, that he should return to fulfill specific purposes that would reveal themselves in time. Even more significant, she shared with him knowledge about the nature of existence after death, revelations that Arthur knew he should carefully guard until the appropriate time to share them. For weeks after his discharge from the hospital, Arthur continued to visit Dr. Reed, not only for routine medical checkups, but to share increasingly profound aspects of his transcendental experience. He spoke of having visited what he described as a cosmic library, an infinite repository of knowledge where every human soul that had ever existed contributed its experiences and learnings to a collective archive of universal wisdom. In this timeless place, Arthur had understood that each earthly life was like a chapter in an infinite book, each individual experience contributing to a larger narrative that encompassed all conscious existence. Dr. Reed found himself at an intellectual and spiritual crossroads. His rigorous medical training demanded skepticism toward claims that couldn't be quantified or replicated in a lab, but the precision of the details reported by Arthur and the genuine transformation in his personality made it impossible to dismiss these experiences entirely as mere fantasy. Arthur had returned from the brink of death not only physically healed, but spiritually transformed, demonstrating a compassion, wisdom, and serenity that seemed to have been acquired in another dimension of existence. As the months passed, Dr. Reed began noticing similar patterns in other patients who had experienced prolonged cardiac arrests during surgery. While not all reported experiences as detailed as Arthur's, many returned with fundamental shifts in their perspectives on life and death, exhibiting a significant reduction in the fear of mortality and a noticeable increase in compassion and spirituality. Some mentioned encounters with deceased relatives, others described feelings of universal oneness, and virtually all reported experiences of intense light radiating unconditional love. Intrigued and simultaneously disturbed by these observations, Dr. Reed secretly began documenting these cases, creating detailed files that he kept separate from his official medical records. He instinctively knew that sharing this information through traditional academic channels would end his medical career, labeling him as a professional who had lost his scientific objectivity. However, the accumulation of anecdotal evidence became increasingly difficult to ignore, especially when he began experiencing his own expanded perceptions during surgical procedures. The first time Dr. Reed experienced something beyond normal consciousness was during a particularly complex surgery in 1981. While working to repair a severely damaged heart valve, he suddenly felt as if his consciousness expanded beyond the confines of his physical body. For a few moments, he could perceive not only what was happening on his surgical table, but also the emotions and concerns of each member of his team, the anxieties of the family members in the waiting room, and even the conscious experience of the anesthetized patient himself. This momentary expansion of consciousness was simultaneously terrifying and illuminating. Dr. Reed felt as if he had briefly touched a dimension of reality where all consciousnesses were interconnected, where the separation between individuals was an illusion maintained only by the apparent limitations of the physical body. The experience lasted only a few seconds, but it was enough to fundamentally alter his understanding of the nature of human consciousness and its relationship to the physical body. In the following years, similar episodes occurred occasionally during especially challenging surgeries, moments when he seemed to access a source of knowledge and intuition that transcended his formal medical education. He began to develop an almost supernatural ability to diagnose complex conditions, often instinctively knowing where to look for problems that weren't evident through conventional examinations. Colleagues began commenting on his seemingly mystical ability to save patients in impossible situations, but Dr. Reed remained completely silent about the true source of his growing medical intuition. For those who follow these extraordinary revelations and wish to continue exploring the mysteries that connect science and spirituality, stories like this represent only the beginning of a fascinating journey through the unexplored territories of human consciousness, where each discovery brings us closer to understanding our true spiritual nature. In 1987, Dr. Reed experienced his deepest and most transformative transcendental experience during an emergency surgery on an 8-year-old child who had suffered a devastating car accident. He entered an altered state of consciousness that would last for nearly a full hour, while his hands continued to work with automatic precision to repair the extensive damage to the child's heart. His consciousness was transported to what he would later describe as a parallel dimension of pure existence. In this expanded state, Dr. Reed found himself in the presence of beings of light who communicated through frequencies of pure love that penetrated directly into his soul. These beings, whom he perceived as spiritual guardians or guides, revealed to him fundamental truths about the nature of human existence and the purpose of earthly life. He understood that each soul chooses its life experiences before incarnating, including the challenges, sufferings, and opportunities for growth it will encounter during its physical journey. The most impactful revelation was the understanding that physical death does not represent the end of consciousness, but merely a transition to an expanded state of being. The beings of light showed him visions of the soul's continuity after bodily death, revealing dimensions of existence where souls continue to evolve, learn, and serve greater universal purposes. He saw how each earthly life is connected by invisible threads of cause and effect, creating a cosmic tapestry where every action, thought, and emotion contributes to the collective evolution of universal consciousness. During this transcendental experience, Dr. Reed also received specific knowledge about his role as a healer. The beings of light revealed that he had chosen the medical profession not only to save physical lives, but to serve as a bridge between the physical and spiritual worlds, witnessing and documenting experiences that would eventually help humanity understand the true nature of consciousness and the continuity of the soul. He saw how his growing spiritual sensitivity was part of a planned awakening that would prepare him for a greater role in humanity's transition to a more integrated understanding of science and spirituality. When Dr. Reed returned to normal consciousness, the surgery had been a complete success, but he was profoundly transformed. The child not only survived against all medical odds, but recovered at a speed that astonished the entire medical team. In the following days, as the child recovered, she began reporting vivid dreams about angels who had protected her during the surgery, descriptions that strikingly corresponded to the visions Dr. Reed had experienced during the same period. Following a transformative experience, Dr. Reed began developing a more holistic approach to his medical practice, quietly incorporating elements of spiritual healing into his conventional treatments. He started meditating before each surgery, praying for spiritual guidance and protection for his patients. During complex procedures, he learned to trust his expanded intuition, often making surgical decisions that contradicted established protocols, but invariably resulted in better patient outcomes. His colleagues began noticing not only his exceptional surgical results, but also a subtle shift in his presence. Patients frequently commented on feeling calmer and more confident under his care, as if a healing energy radiated from him. Nurses observed that recovery rates in his cases consistently exceeded hospital statistics, and post-operative complications were rare among his patients. Over the following years, Dr. Reed continued collecting evidence on near-death experiences and spiritual phenomena in the hospital setting. He documented cases of patients describing encounters with deceased relatives during surgeries, prophetic visions that later came true, and inexplicable healings that defied medical diagnoses. Some patients reported receiving specific messages from deceased loved ones, messages that, when verified with family members, contained information the patients couldn't have known through conventional means. One of the most remarkable cases in his private files involved a 55-year-old woman who underwent emergency heart surgery in 1992. During the procedure, she experienced cardiac arrest lasting 12 minutes, during which she reported visiting a heavenly garden where she encountered her son, who had died in combat in Vietnam 20 years earlier. Her son communicated specific details about the location of a letter he had written before he died, but that had never been delivered. When the family verified the information after the patient's recovery, they found the letter exactly where she described it. hidden in a place only the soldier himself could have known. Cases like this accumulated over the years, creating a body of evidence that Dr. Reed knew he would one day have to share with the world, even knowing it might cost him his professional reputation. He came to view his meticulous documentation as a spiritual legacy, a contribution to the eventual integration of medical science and spiritual understanding that he believed was inevitable in humanity's future. As he approached retirement, Dr. Reed began experiencing his own spiritual premonitions about his impending mortality. He started having vivid dreams where deceased relatives appeared to prepare him for his own transition, sharing visions of the work he would continue after leaving his physical body. These dreams were accompanied by a profound serenity about his own death, an acceptance that contrasted sharply with the fear of mortality that had characterized his youth. In his final years of active practice, Dr. Reed developed an even more refined ability to perceive when patients were nearing their transition to the spiritual world. He frequently sensed subtle signs that deceased family members were approaching to receive the transitioning soul, insights he carefully shared with family members to prepare them for the imminent passing of their loved ones. Many families later confirmed they had perceived spiritual presences or inexplicable signs during the final moments of their relatives' lives, validating Dr. Reed's intuitive perceptions. When he was finally diagnosed with advanced-stage lung cancer in 1998, Dr. Reed faced the news with an equanimity that surprised his colleagues and family. He intuitively knew that his mission as a physical healer was ending, but that a new phase of his spiritual work was about to begin. It was in this context that he decided to record his final testimony, knowing these revelations would be his final contribution to helping humanity understand the true nature of existence. During his final months, Dr. Reed experienced increasingly frequent spiritual visits from deceased medical colleagues, especially mentors who had influenced his medical career. These spiritual encounters were accompanied by visions of the work he would perform on the other side, including serving as a guide for other healthcare professionals who were beginning to awaken to the spiritual dimensions of healing. He also received prophetic visions about the future of medicine, glimpsing an era where the integration of science and spirituality would not only be accepted but considered essential for complete healing. He saw hospitals of the future where sophisticated equipment would work in harmony with spiritual healing practices, where doctors would be trained not only in surgical techniques, but also in spiritual sensitivity and intuitive abilities. In the final weeks of his life, Dr. Reed began experiencing what he described as leakages between the physical and spiritual dimensions. He could simultaneously perceive the physical reality of his hospital room and spiritual landscapes of indescribable beauty that superimposed themselves on his normal vision. Family members and nurses often found him conversing with invisible presences, dialogues he explained as communications with spiritual guides who were preparing his transition. During one of these spiritual conversations, Dr. Reed received the final revelation he considered the most important of all his transcendental experiences. Beings of light revealed to him that each human soul is literally a fragment of the universal divine consciousness, sent to earthly experience to gather specific knowledge and experiences that contribute to the ongoing evolution of the divine source itself. He understood that the suffering, joys, challenges, and triumphs of each individual life are not random events but experiences carefully chosen by the soul to promote specific spiritual growth. This final revelation brought Dr. Reed a profound understanding of the ultimate purpose of human existence. He saw how each act of compassion, each moment of love, each choice to serve others directly contributes to the elevation of universal consciousness. He understood that professions like medicine are sacred choices of the soul, opportunities to serve as instruments of divine healing through the human form. In the final days before his passing, Dr. Reed shared some of the revelations from his secret recording with close family members, preparing them for the fact that his spiritual legacy would eventually be more significant than his conventional medical contributions. He instructed that his files on near-death experiences be preserved, anticipating a future time when humanity would be ready to integrate this knowledge into mainstream medical practice. When Dr. Julian Reed finally passed away in December 1998, witnesses reported an extraordinary peace filling his room, accompanied by an inexplicable fragrance of flowers that were not physically present. Nurses commented on a sense of angelic presence during his final moments, and several family members later reported vivid dreams where he appeared to assure them he had made a smooth transition to higher dimensions of existence. His secret recording remained hidden for over 2 decades, protected by family members who understood both its value and the controversy it could generate if prematurely released. Only now, in an era where the integration of science and spirituality is beginning to be accepted in progressive academic circles, can this extraordinary testimony finally be shared with the world. Dr. Julian Reed's words represent more than the memories of an exceptional physician. They constitute a spiritual map for understanding our true nature as eternal beings temporarily inhabiting physical forms. His accounts of the continuity of consciousness after physical death are not only comforting to those facing the loss of loved ones but offer a revolutionary perspective on the purpose and meaning of human existence. Through his transcendental experiences and meticulous observations during decades of medical practice, Dr. Reed invites us to expand our understanding of the mysteries of life and death, suggesting that the medicine of the future must embrace both scientific precision and spiritual wisdom. His legacy reminds us that we are more than temporary physical bodies. We are eternal souls on journeys of discovery and growth connected by invisible threads of love and purpose that transcend the apparent limitations of material existence. The revelations contained in his hidden recording continue to echo through time, offering hope and understanding to all those seeking answers to the fundamental mysteries of human existence, confirming that death is not an end but simply a transition to expanded forms of life and consciousness awaiting each soul at the appropriate moment of its eternal journey.